I'm going to go ahead and get started because, yeah, especially with the picture on the left, I'm ready. So yeah, welcome everybody. Right, the first quarter Chicago Tug Group. We know from some of the survey results, folks like the Thursday evening. We were hunting for when in March, and then was like, well, we'll probably get bad turnout if we do it on St. Patrick's Day. So we backed up the one day to celebrate the eve, and then tomorrow everybody can go pretend to be Irish somewhere. We do have a picture here of the river turning green. So Rahul, who's one of the Shy Tug members, was out probably for his first solid warm go check out the Green River experience this past weekend. And he texted this to me with the merchandise marked, and it's a perfect way to get started. So outside of this one page, there will not be cheeky recurring St. Patrick jokes all throughout the thing. I suppressed the urge. But yeah, definitely welcome. For Shy Tug news, the first one is I want to heartily welcome Ashley Dierkes, if I pronounced your name correctly, Fear the Dierkes, to the Shy Tug co-leadership. She'll be the first presenter tonight, but she's been kind of close to the group for a number of rounds. And this was the perfect time to say, would you like to go all in and join us at the leadership side? So very much welcome, Ashley. Be on the lookout. This one, actually, I didn't ask the co-leaders. So I guess this is my own thing of kind of making a promise. I am interested in getting to know people a little bit more personally, but instead of waiting to maybe the next tug, being in the summertime, I'm just going to organize one where it's just more of like a, hey, anybody in the Shy Tug wants to get together. Here's a spot that's actually probably pretty close to that picture with the merchandise marked, and come over, say hi, right? It's just drinks and very casual conversation. So be on the lookout for a happy hour that happens between now and the next tug meeting. We decided to book the whole year, largely so we can actually get the preferential picking of Thursday evenings. So yeah, the next one will be June 2nd. And then we've got the August one figured out and the November one, kind of timing those to get a little bit away from Labor Day weekend and stay away from Thanksgiving and holidays. All of them will be 5 o'clock to 6:30 Chicago time, just like tonight's. And the last one is then more Tableau news. The Tableau conference is now on sale. So I know a few people that are in the Shy Tug already got their tickets. Went on sale yesterday morning at 9 a.m. There is in-person tickets. There's still the virtual option, and that is literally the beginning and the end of what I know about what to expect. So, but yeah, definitely go check it out. So what's happening tonight? As I said, newest co-leader Ashley is joining us from Discover. We'll pass the ball to her first. She's one of the people, but probably the key person running the Tableau server at Discover. I'm one of the beneficiaries of it, immensely rely on her, rely on the team. So she's going to take us through the Tableau server and some of those experiences. Tom, another co-leader, heavily focused on customer experience, customer interfaces, is brought intro to product design and design thinking. And then I've got the third slot. I really got into the DuBois challenge, at least the story of it last year. And this year I was just inspired to try to drum up some other participation. So I'll tell a little bit of the history of DuBois and the challenge, and kind of show some excellent visuals that are floating around the internet right now. The meeting actually ends at 6:30, but we leave the team open, or teams. I keep doing that. We leave the Zoom open. So I did it last time as well. We'll just kind of hang out in there and just see who else hangs out. It's very informal. There's no actual content. Just maybe geeking out a little bit. That's about it. So without further ado, I'll stop sharing my screen, and Ashley, you can go ahead and snag it and tell us about
All right. Let me share All right.
Just hit stop sharing. There you go. I can see you now.
Do you see full screen?
Right now, it's still with the wraparound.
Oh, I probably am facing the same issue you were.
Yeah. So I had to go share my whole screen.
Is it better
there we
now?
Go. That one works.
Perfect.
Yep.
All right. So thank you for the introduction, Kevin. I am Ashley Dierkes. I work at Discover Financial Services, and I am here to talk a little bit about Tableau Server and what a Tableau Center of Enablement team is and what we do. So get started off with this little blurb. I just want to note any opinions in this presentation are just my opinions. Sorry, you're stuck with my opinions, not the opinions of Discover as a whole. To talk about our agenda, we're going to talk about Tableau Online versus Tableau Server, why at Discover we use Tableau Server, some responsibilities of a Tableau Center of Enablement team, and some points to consider moving forward after the presentation. So a lot of times in these presentations, since majority of the users that make up the Chicago Tug are actual Tableau developers and content consumers. So it makes sense that majority of the presentations are more software side focused. So what to do in Tableau Desktop, how to build out the best visualizations, how to optimize them, maybe a little Tableau prep builder sprinkled in there. But I'm actually going to talk about kind of what's happening behind the curtain. So when you create a visualization and you publish it to a server for other people to see, there's kind of two enterprise-wide solutions. There is a third, more individual solution, which would be Tableau Public. As we all know, around Tableau Public, you can't really lock permissions or anything like that on your views. So if you're talking about enterprise-wide data, you're probably going to be looking at either Tableau Online or Tableau Server. So if you're a developer or you're a content consumer, you may not even know if your company is a Tableau Online shop or a Tableau Server shop. And that is because on the front end, there's no difference. It looks the same to you. It's the same user experience, but there's a lot of differences on the back end. So the first one that I want to call out, and really the main difference between these two options, is who's actually managing your server. So Tableau Online is more of a software as a service model. So the Tableau vendor actually is monitoring your server, updating it, all of that stuff. Where the Tableau Server option, it's all hosted on-prem internally, and you have a team within your company that is managing your server. To highlight some other differences, Tableau Online is hosted outside of your firewall, where Tableau Server, it's hosted on-prem, like I said, so it's inside your firewall. Tableau Online, if you're wanting to connect to some on-prem data that your company has, you're going to have to use Tableau Bridge to connect to this, where Tableau Server, if you're connecting to on-prem data, your server is on-prem, you won't have to worry about that. Tableau Online is a pay-per-user model, so that's referred to as role-based licensing, where Tableau Server, you have the option between paying per user or paying per core. Tableau Online, you get a site and you can build out more of a project structure through there. With Tableau Server, you have unlimited sites, so you can decide if you want your server sites to be at a business unit level, at an individual team level. You get a lot of freedom on that side. Tableau Online, Tableau has already established different database connections and authentication methods you can use. With Tableau Server, you can add your own data connectors or integrate your own authentication methods. Tableau Online, the Tableau vendor team, they're installing this for you. They're taking your backups. They're running upgrades. I think their upgrades are quarterly. If you're using Tableau Online, you'll probably always have the newest Tableau version, where Tableau Server, your own internal team installs it. They're taking the daily backups and they're performing the upgrades. Also with Tableau Online, you have access to admin insights, which to my understanding is pre-built dashboards that can kind of help you dig a little deeper into your content. With Tableau Server, you have access to the Postgres metadata. So this is all of the metadata for your Tableau server, and you can kind of build out your own reports depending on what use cases come your way. We also build out a lot of published data sources that we publish to our server, and we'll have some focused on views, we'll have some focused on background tasks, and then we let our user community kind of go in there and build their own reports out of it. That way they can focus on their site specifically or their content specifically. As I mentioned, at Discover, we use Tableau Server. That's why this presentation will be more Tableau Server based than Tableau Online. One of the main reasons we picked Tableau Server is we wanted an on-prem server because we have highly sensitive data, and we wanted to make sure that we were the ones monitoring and controlling that data. We also liked that you could personalize a lot of the server parameters. So this slide and the next slide kind of highlights some of the server parameters on Tableau Online, where compared to Tableau Server, you get to control these things. So it's breaking out into a couple different categories. We have storage, extract refreshes, subscriptions, metrics, flows, and visualizations. So just to kind of give one example, on here, you can see that the site storage is 100 gigabytes. We start our site storage much lower than that. And the main reason is because we just want to know where most of our content is living. So a team will come to us and they'll say, hey, we need more space on our site. And we'll say, okay, great, give us 15 minutes. We'll use those 15 minutes to look and see if they have any extremely large workbooks or data sources published to that server. If they do, we'll talk to them and say, hey, do you actually need all this information? Is this content being consumed? And this is just kind of a proactive way that we can stay ahead of things and say, okay, we want to make sure that we're only giving out space that's needed and the space we're giving out is used properly. Going back to why we picked a Tableau server, I think somebody might be getting a call. Okay, there's more database options and authentication options that we can match with what we use internally. The access to the Postgres metadata is another great feature that we love. And I kind of went over some of the differences between the two, and it really takes a full team to support the Tableau server. So if Tableau server is something that your company is thinking about using or you're interested in it, you really need a team to support that. So we have our Tableau COE Center of Enablement team. Our team is broken down. As you can see, we have 2 system administrators, 3 solution engineers, we have an offshore support team, and then we have our leadership. So you might be asking, okay, what exactly does this Tableau COE team do? And I would say, thank you for asking. So one thing that we like to communicate is that we support the platform as a whole. So when I say the platform, I mean the developers, the community, and the server. What I don't mean is that if an individual user posts or published a dashboard, we're not the SMEs on the data, so we don't know if the data is accurate. We're not on that team, so we don't know who should or shouldn't be seeing the content. So stuff like that, we really rely on our site admins and project leaders and content owners to take control of, but we support them to the best of our abilities. So you can kind of break out the work that our team does really into 3 categories: server maintenance, server governance, and then community support. So starting with server maintenance, like I mentioned earlier, we run our own upgrades. So this is kind of a long process. We do our own testing as a team. We open it up to user testing, and we really go through things with a fine-tooth comb because we want to make sure when we make the upgrade, no issues come up. We also perform our own daily backups and restores, log cleanup, server resource resource monitoring, and alerts. Server governance is another huge part of what we do and a very important thing that we do. One thing that we do is we have a script that removes stale content. Obviously, we don't remove any content before talking to the owner of it, but it is important that only content that is actively being consumed is on the server. We don't want a report out there that's refreshing every day and taking resources if nobody's actually using that report. Another thing that we do is ensure all content on the server has an active owner. This is important because if we do have issues with a workbook, if it keeps failing, if we have a user come to us and say, hey, how do we get access to this report? We need to know who to direct them to, who is the owner of that report, who can help them out. So that is another process that we have in place. And then, as I kind of mentioned earlier with the server parameters, we're able to set our own extract refresh time limits and rendering time limits. In regards to a community support stance, we do a lot of consulting engagements and solution engineering work. So if a team is new to Tableau, we'll sit down with them, help them make sure they start off knowing the best practices and how we run our Tableau environment here at Discover. We also will get involved if it's more of a complex use case or they're running into some roadblocks, helping in any way that we can. User community events is another big thing that we do. We do our own internal Tableau user group meetings at Discover. We try to do them on a quarterly basis, and we actually just had one last week. We also had an actual Tableau day, which was essentially a mini Tableau conference internal to Discover. We had over 500 people attend. We had speakers from Tableau and external companies. So really just trying to bring the community together and the minds that actually create the reports and are knee deep in Tableau. We want to put them in the same room to see, hey, what can we do better as a platform, and really just kind of cross-train people. Also for community events, we'll do some fun events. So we did a company-wide design-a-thon a couple of years ago, and we're actually hoping to do another one this year. And with any platform, communication is extremely important. So if there's an outage, we want to be able to let people know. If we're running an upgrade and we need help testing, we want to be able to communicate to people. So having multiple avenues of communication, some for more targeted communication, some for broad communication, that's another important thing that we do. So I kind of talked a little bit about our internal Tableau COE team. I know some of them are on this call, so shout out, you guys are the best. But we also have a great Tableau vendor partner team. So we do weekly touch base meetings with them regarding the server. We do bi-weekly community touch base meetings. We're part of the beta release program. So sometimes we're actually able to pilot and try out new features. We were able to do this with Write to Database for Tableau Prep, which was awesome. And for Tableau Prep, we are able to have feedback sessions with the Tableau Prep and Data Management product owner. These are super helpful because we can talk to them about how we're using the tools at Discover, where we want the tools to go. They'll let us know if it's on the roadmap, and kind of help us make sure that we're training people in the best way possible and promoting the proper use case for these tools. So I talked a lot about Tableau Server, which makes sense because that was the point of this presentation. And I'm not saying Tableau Server is better than Tableau Online or vice versa. Tableau Server is what my team and I know, so that's kind of what I was talking about. If you do like the sound of Tableau Server and you think it might be something that's good for your company or something that you're interested in, a few things that you'll probably just want to make sure of is that you have the proper hardware to support the servers, as well as a team that can support the servers and the community as a whole. Confirm that whatever data connections or authentication method you're using will work on Tableau Server. And then, as I mentioned before, you have two options for your licensing models. You can either pay by user or pay by cores. So with that, I will open it up to questions if there are any. Or maybe I answered everything already.
I'll just say this really quickly, Ashley. What you just said was fantastic. I've been working with my admin team and our server team for the last couple of years. If anyone does have questions and they're just nervous about chat or whatever, go connect with Ashley. You want to get those answers taken care of. She knows a whole lot more than she just shared. This is like the 1%, I can tell.
Yes, I am totally available to answer questions. If you have questions that you think of later, I'll stick around after the call, or the Slack group. I'm there also. You can feel free to message me.
Somebody said having a server team like you guys sounds dreamy. Oh, the best compliment. But yeah, definitely worth the investment. Okay.
And good segue there, actually, real quick, Ashley. For those that are not aware on the call, because she just mentioned the Slack, we have a Slack channel for the Tableau user group here in Chicago. It's Chicago specific only. And if anyone is interested in joining that Slack channel, they can just reach out to us after this, and we can get you added. All we need is an email address and your name. It's a great place to get questions answered in real time. We've seen a couple of server questions actually getting solved there. If you want feedback on a viz that you've recently created, it's a good space to come and do that as well. But the best part, obviously, is that it's all people local in Chicago. So these are hopefully people you might get to see and know in the near future.
All right, we'll transition to Tom presenting. Cindy already said she's interested in the Slack channel, so I'll DM you directly to get your email address.
Thanks for taking care of that, Kevin. I'm going to go ahead and get my screen kicked up here. And move that over. All right. And into presentation mode. Of course, it did the same thing to you guys too.
Yeah.
Okay. Never a dull moment. All right. My name is Tom Seiple. I work for CCC Information Systems here in Chicago. We are an insurtech company. Until fairly recently, I was on our analytics team where I was our lead design liaison and Tableau developer. I've recently switched to a full-time design role where I'm now a UX designer, and I'm also our lead kind of informatics specialist, which is a fancy word for saying I have opinions about charts. And I'm going to walk through Product Design 101 today. So how do we develop technical solutions within the tech setting? We're going to get started off here. Ashley reminded me that I should also say that these are my own opinions and do not reflect that of my employer. It's on the recording. Let's talk about what a product is. So a product within a tech setting or within an entrepreneurial market transitional or transactional space, whatever, we can define a product as something that's desirable. And we want to define those as units of a product. So is it a dashboard? Is it a process? Is it a collection of tools? How do we scope then the walls around that thing? Because if you think about most of the products in your life, they have leaders to other products or connectors to other products, hard, soft walls of whether or not something cuts off and it transitions to a new product or the two bleed together. Thinking like Tableau Prep versus Tableau kind of bleed into one another. Support and team engagement. So typically like a product is actually supported by a group of people or an idea or concept. You're going to have solutions around it to help support it. So even if it's open source, something like JavaScript, there's a lot of support around JavaScript as a product. There's a defined user base of people, whether that's even just 2 people or 2 million people. Products have users. They're always solutions oriented. So a product is always aiming towards addressing a problem or coming up with a solution or addressing a gap, whatever that may be. And then I would encourage you, just for that last line, you need to define these things for yourself within your org, or someone else will define them for you. So when we go to set out to build Tableau dashboards or deliver Tableau server architecture, if we don't set up the rules for all these bullets and the many more that I think you probably should add to, because this is going to be different for every company, if you don't define the rules for all of these bullets, eventually someone else or some other people groups are going to define those things for you. So I'm going to walk through how we actually build and conceptualize a product for the remainder of the presentation, but keep these in the back of your head for kind of understanding how we define a product solution within the tech industry or within a market in general. Product development, so these are not my opinions. These are actually coming from a real company that's probably smarter than me. This is coming from IDEO. For those who are not familiar with them, they are a marketing company. And IDEO is one of the flagship companies that branded this concept of design thinking. And the idea around design thinking is that coming up with creative solutions and coming up with creative products is really, really hard. If you have a template or process to follow, 9 times out of 10, you'll actually come up with something decent because you've gone through the steps to weed out the bad ideas or to get over the barriers that sometimes get in the way of creativity. So one of the things that IDEO posits for design thinking is first that a product needs to be desirable, it needs to be feasible, and it needs to be viable. If a product does not land in the middle of these 3 circles, then it's not within the scope of what you can actually deliver effectively as a company. So something might be super desirable and it might be really feasible, but if there's just no viability, meaning that there's no market for it or there's no actual market value that you can extract from it, it's probably not going to work. It's probably not going to sell really, really well. Likewise, if something's got a lot of viability and feasibility, but there's just no desirability within the market for it, or the market's flooded with tons of other products that do that, you're going to have a hard time getting that kind of off the ground. So the first question we always want to ask ourselves when we're getting ready to build something, someone sends you an email and says, oh, we need this tomorrow. Desirability, viability, and feasibility, it has to land in the middle of those 3 things. Otherwise, you're going to have a hard time really getting that product to survive long term. The next thing that I want to introduce is this concept of divergent and convergent thinking. So when we start building a product or a process, we can't just jump right into the details. It's one of the things that irritates me the most as a creative is when you sit down with a team and they want to build something and they start talking numbers and they start talking data, and that's coming from a numbers and data guy. We need to start with an idea, blow it out, and then bring it back in. And that's the idea of this divergent and convergent thinking. So we start with a concept, we want to blow it out and think about all the ways that it kind of connects to other things. One of my favorite people that I like to reference in here is like Charlie Munger, who is a famous investor. One of his things that he's most well known for is knowing a ton about a bunch of seemingly disconnected things. And if you sit down and talk with him long enough, you start to realize that all of these disconnected things trickle back to these central concepts. And he uses this seemingly disparate data or information to come up with really creative solutions within the finance and banking world. Same thing here. So like we talk about being divergent, we want to think about other customers. We want to think about the future. We want to think about 5 years from now. We want to think about whether or not we get bought out by another company. Like anything and everything under the sun kind of fits within divergent thinking. The idea is, I like to also say, like, we're throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. And then once we get to this point of turning, we then turn into convergent thinking, which is we have now this dearth of ideas and concepts, and we're going to start running a comb through it to get back down to the distilled, just the part that we want to get a quality product out of it. Again, when we think about a lot of the things that are probably floating around in most of our orgs, that damn Excel file that everyone emails to each other that no one seems to be able to kill, that dashboard that is way too big and has way too many pages on it, that data pipeline that is in every single project and no one's really sure who runs the database, Whatever those things are, they're a result of non-divergent thinking and non-convergent thinking. We just came up with an idea and we're going to run with it. We didn't think through all the consequences to get you to the end. The design thinking process that IDEO puts out has these steps in it. And I recognize this might be kind of small for everyone, so I'll just read it out for you. We're going to frame a question. We're going to gather inspiration. We're going to generate ideas. We're going to make ideas tangible. Then we're going to test to learn. And then we're going to share the story at the end. I'll explain each one of these steps here next. So when we're framing a question, this first step, we want to find the core concept of what it is that we are after. So again, when someone comes to me and says, we need a dashboard and we need to understand profits, I ask why a lot, probably an obnoxious amount of whys, like 3-year-old asking, why should I be doing this amount of whys? But there's a reason to that. And the reason is to actually dig underneath this urgency of like, I got to know what profit was last quarter. And you start asking why enough times, you start to maybe realize like, oh, well, the real reason why we're worried about profit is because we didn't have a good quarter last year, or we didn't have a good quarter last quarter. But why didn't we have a good quarter last quarter? Well, sales were down. Why were sales down? Oh, well, the coronavirus spiked. Oh, so what we really actually need is a dashboard that's tracking corona activity against sales potentially. Maybe a good idea, maybe not a good idea, but it addresses something much more important and salient underneath all of that, as opposed to just a dashboard that has a line chart showing profit. I also say get comfortable with uncertainty. We ask a lot of questions, but there are going to be probably questions we can't answer in one single meeting. And that's okay. We need to leave enough breathing room in the system to work through it so that we're not just deciding on a product after 1 2-hour meeting where probably one person is dominating most of the conversation. Stay big, stay vague, and we'll get into more detail later. So the next step is to gather inspiration. I like to call this your chance to kind of create your vision board, your dream board, whatever. There are really great tools out there for doing this. For those that are chronically online, things like Pinterest and other tools like that are really, really good for gathering information and storing them in places. I personally have sticky notes all over my desk that have just ideas and concepts on them. But when we start building a product, we want to start gathering inspiration from other places, and they don't even need to be necessarily adjacent. It can be really, really distant, really, really far out there. You'll be really surprised where you can get really cool ideas from if you just kind of sit in the uncertainty and explore. I like to say that this is your point. This is your time to go down very, very deep rabbit holes. It's early in the product process. It's early into the design concept. You want to explore as deep and as vast as you can go, because you might actually find something really tremendous in terms of value. After that, we're going to start generating ideas. And I like to say that this is maybe the sort of turning point, or maybe the widest point of the divergent thinking part of the column. So we're generating ideas. We're coming with ideas about, well, what if it could do this? What if it could do this? Does it need to be a Tableau dashboard? What if we made an entire website? These what if scenarios need to run vast and large, because you can start eliminating, like, we don't have budget for this, or we don't have enough man hours for this, or we don't have the support team to keep this thing kind of running. And those things will naturally eliminate themselves as reality sets in with a lot of those ideas. This is a time to get creative and stretch your mind. And it's also a time to start to turn the corner, because then we're going to start to make the ideas tangible. And this is where we start to get into prototyping. We start saying, here's the best idea, or here are the 3 best ideas. Let's run with them and come up with some concepts. For those that are maybe not familiar with the concept of wireframing is building something out that's not sitting on top of any data. I have a notebook over here that has tons of wireframes, and it's just pen and colored pencil. I am not an artist. I'm a creative type, but I'm not an artist. They don't have to be good. They just need to be lightweight, quick throwaway things that, like, if you show it to someone who's a stakeholder or whatever, and they say, that sucks, you don't feel bad. You didn't waste a lot of time on a really brilliant idea that gets thrown out for some silly reason. I like to say that, like, keep it simple, keep it clear, keep it focused. If you can find ways to draw parallels between your prototypes, to say, like, this is prototype A, this is prototype B, here's how they're doing the same thing but different. Also really, really stellar, because that helps users to understand how they have different options to pick from. After that, we want to test to learn. So once you have a concept or idea fully fleshed out, you've got some wireframes, you've got some prototypes, you want to take it out into the market, or you want to take it out to focus groups, you want to take it out into your internal teams that are going to be consuming these things, but you want to get their feedback. I would say if you have a UX team in your company, go to them and say, like, how do we do this? How do we do good user testing? They will have great ideas on how to build both qualitative data and quantitative data around these things. That said, it doesn't even necessarily need to be this official, especially internally speaking. Get these things tested with users. I like to say, like, my boss often told me in my last job, like, oh, can't you just build it? And yeah, I probably could, and it would probably be pretty good. But that said, do we really want to keep gambling like multi-million-dollar projects on, well, Tom will probably just get it right? I don't think that that's a good gamble. And that's where user testing is really, really valuable, because then we know it's going to click with the market. There's no questioning, there's no guessing. And it only takes maybe a couple extra weeks. It's not a huge ask. It's just a little bit more time in the system, a little bit more slack in the system to really make sure that it's going to actually land where we need it to. And the last thing, this is share the story. Now, again, IDEO is a marketing company, so this is kind of the end of the line. So in this case, I like to say this is when we're going to build it. So as Tableau people, as analysts, as people that are building content for people to consume, this is our chance to build the content. We've got the feedback we need. We've got the wireframe. Now we just need to sit down with the data and build the thing out and share it. Easier said than done, right? One slide for probably the bulk of the work actually being done by the dev team. But it's really important that we do all those other steps, because when we get to here and we actually start doing, quote unquote, the work, we know what we're doing. We've got a roadmap, we've got a plan, it's all been validated, we're set to go. I'm going to walk through then now some of the different tools that you can use to do all of this work up until the build phase. So within product design, we've got some concepts and ideas. I'll share some resources here, obviously. One of those is this concept of design thinking. So we've got these circles, as you can follow here. We go from understand to observe to define to ideate to prototype to test. Sounds very similar to what we were just talking about earlier with what IDEO shared. One of the cool things within this hybrid process is that we actually kind of jump around with some things. That's the first thing I'll say here is, like, once you have that pipeline, feel free to change the pieces out. You might need to actually like move some stuff around a little bit, or you might need to do multiple convergent, divergent thinking processes. It doesn't have to be just one time. So feel free to move around the parts once you feel like you've kind of mastered or built this skill set. These are two really, really great books if you're more interested in getting to know this stuff. One that's called the Design Thinking Toolbox, and the other one that's called the Design Thinking Playbook. Both of these are geared towards nonlinear readings, meaning like you're going to open it up, go to a specific page, learn something, and then maybe go to an entirely different page. I haven't read either of these books cover to cover, but I've read several sections multiple times. So it doesn't, I guess it reads maybe more like a textbook where you're going to go to a specific section to learn something, but they're all practical tool sets that you can use in either group settings or individual settings to enhance your creative process around building a product. Other common things that everyone should be familiar with: brainstorming. We've all done brainstorming sessions before. That said, I would say that most of us probably get brainstorming sessions pretty wrong. I think we've all probably been in a really bad brainstorming session where one person dominates the conversation and suddenly we're talking about why raccoons do what they do. And we wonder why we got there. So I like to say for brainstorming sessions, these are super loosely defined, and there's just sessions that say, hey, let's get together and make some ideas. Put some framework around those sessions. Otherwise, you will be talking about raccoons. So define the scope earlier. We want to define clear boundaries of like, we're going to be covering this, but we're not covering this. I've noticed that a lot within the business sector is like, we want to talk about business sector A, which has adjacencies to B, C, and D, and other people in B, C, and D who got invited want to talk about their sector. And we say, no, we're only talking about A. It's well and fine. We'll think about B and C and D later, but we need to stay focused on A for the time being. I say come with a list of questions. Treat this like an interview. So you're going to know, like, we want to talk to you about this. We want to talk about this. We want to talk to you about this. I like to say cap the time on certain items. If you know that we could potentially run really, really long on item 2, say, hey, we're going to spend 15 minutes on this. We got to cap it there. And always ensure that everyone shares. I'm a type A person. I tend to overtalk in meetings. I've been working really, really hard to make sure that all of the introverts in the room also get the time that's due to them. So be equitable with sharing. User persona development. This is a really cool concept where we actually build out hypothetical personas. So we might have like user persona A, super intelligent developer type, user persona B, creative person, user persona C, stay-at-home mom who does blah, blah, blah. But we build these user personas around who we think is going to be using the product, and we start to try and define them as a kind of generic individual. We think about things like, what are their fears? What are their wants? What are their needs? Existing knowledge that they have, relationships to others. Those will help you to flesh out what you do and do not need to address within a product more often than not. User journey maps. These are visual ways to look at the full journey through a product. These can get really, really complicated very, very quickly. One of the ways that I like to define both the user journey map and another thing we'll talk about in a second is when you walk into a McDonald's in any part of the world, you have more or less the exact same experience. And that is because that experience is designed. And this is the process of walking through how does a user experience a thing. Ashley will resonate with this because we talk about this a lot within my own Tableau server. We talk about the experience of someone logging into Tableau server, navigating the sites, finding the workbook that they're interested in, sharing that workbook out with a particular constituent that they want to share it with, getting feedback from people. Those are journeys that have particular touch points throughout that process. And it is important that we think about that journey, because if someone's 15 clicks into trying to do something and they can't figure it out, they will become very frustrated and they will stop using your product. Jobs to be done. Like I was just saying, touch points within that journey. Jobs to be done, same kind of concept. We want to talk about like, we want to accomplish blah, blah, blah by doing blah, blah, blah. So good question here that I like to frame with is, when blank, I want to blank so I can blank. This is a great framework for asking specifically what someone needs in order to get something done. So when I log into Tableau server, I want to find my dashboard so I can check revenue for the quarter. Great, simple question, and it actually really defines a really good use case right out of the gate. Service blueprints, like I was saying about McDonald's earlier. So a service blueprint is not just the journey, but it's also the things that are kind of working together with the service that's being provided to create the cohesive experience. So within a service blueprint, we might have like several different lanes that have like, we'll use McDonald's again. You have the customer, you have the cashier, you have the cook, you have the equipment, you have, I don't know, maybe like the electrical grid within the building, but you can have lanes for all of the things that have to go together or have to function together to provide the service. And then you can define your other lanes that go down in terms of events, in terms of time, in terms of whatever that helps the linear process move along. It's a really great way for double checking what has to happen at each individual interval within the user's journey to get what you need done. Lastly, scoping projects. These are just some screenshots of things that I use. I scope projects all the time with my team to talk about the individual steps that we want to take and the sub steps within those steps. I highly recommend, if you don't have a good tool for scoping projects or for tracking projects within your team, go and get one. Jira, other things like that are great resources for tracking all of those things. And here I mentioned Jira. Agile and Scrum are also great resources for that. I'm sure you've probably heard those things thrown around within the tech sector before. Additional tips, I mentioned this earlier. Get used to sketching. I sketch all the time. I'm not a good artist, like I said, but you want to get comfortable with the idea of like drawing and doodling. And, like I said, these are not great illustrations I have here, but this is how I start a product off, or how I get that kind of going. Other tools that can help you with that, Miro is a really great tool, or Figma is another really good tool that's being used much more often in the industry. Miro is a good whiteboarding tool. You can collaborate with multiple people in the same space, and with a lot of us working remotely, it's really nice because team member from California can log in and work with team member from Ohio and doodle around in the same whiteboard space together. So last two things I want to mention here, and then Kevin, am I doing good on time?
Yeah, you're actually doing well. Ashley was
Okay.
ahead of schedule. Yep.
Good. I have one other thing I was going to cover before we're done here. So Tableau as a product. So everything I just talked about, product design, coming up with ideas, ideating on products. The reason this is so important is because every time we publish a Tableau dashboard onto a Tableau server, or every time you send a Tableau dashboard to a coworker, you are sending them a product. And within that, you have data, you have the user experience of the workbook, you have theoretically whatever source they're getting the workbook from, whether that's from like a SharePoint site, or if they're getting it off of server, or if they're pulling it out of an email. There's an experience involved in that process. And 9 times out of 10, based on what I've seen throughout the market sector, particularly with like Excel workbooks, is no one really thinks about what they're sending off as a product to someone. It's always like mail. And no one really thinks about the concept of like, oh, how is this mail piece going to, how is someone going to interact with this mail that I sent them? And we really need to pivot away from, or I think into this idea of Tableau as a product or as a service. More and more, I'm seeing Tableau shops building dashboards for external clients, for people to consume the analytics that I've created in an environment using Tableau. And if the user experience sucks, or simply we're not addressing the user's expectations within the dashboard, it's not going to get used. And we've seen a lot of products that we've tried to launch with minimal user input and minimal design input kind of bomb. And then we sit and wonder why. Well, we put all the calculations in there and stuff, but if the navigation through the tool kind of sucks, it's just not going to get used. And so I really want to encourage everyone who's working and building with Tableau to think about Tableau as a producting solution, not only as a product in and of itself. The last quick thing that I wanted to cover here, and I'll fly through this, Kevin, just so we have enough time. This is an excerpt straight from Scott Biernato's book. He used to work with the Washington Post as their head of data visualization and journalism, so a certified smart person. And he positions this concept of 2 questions, 4 types when it comes to data visualization. So every data viz can sit on an XY axis. So you have declarative and exploratory versus conceptual and data-driven. And every data viz in the world falls somewhere on these axes. The conceptual ideas are just that, ideas simplified. They're about teaching. How does something generally work? A data-driven viz is going to be statistical, mathematical. There's actually a formula behind things or actual data. A typical question that kind of reflects this is like, how are revenues doing right now or something? Declarative is all about documenting. There's a singular outcome. Quarterly reports are a perfect example of like a declarative visualization. The revenue was 6, or the outcome was blah, blah, blah. Exploratory is all about like loose navigating data. There's no right or wrong answers. A lot of it is like digging to find more information and often more questions. And so we can kind of plot those into 4 quadrants where like in that top left-hand corner, you have idea illustration, and the bottom left, you have idea generation. In the top right, most things that we're going to be familiar with in the Tableau world are everyday data vizes. And then the bottom is that data discovery or visual discovery process. And then I'll show you what examples of each of those look like. So the idea illustration concept, this is an illustration I made a long time ago to illustrate a framework within a company that I was working at. It's arrows and diagrams and circles, and you can see that like things in this group are related to this group, but they're individually in 2 different buckets. It's all about just illustrating a more complicated idea in a simple visual. Idea generation reflects the idea that there might be some data maybe involved, but it's still about exploring a concept. In this case, this is another visualization I created that shows the difference between impervious and semi-impervious surfaces when water flows over them. So there's no real data here, but it reflects like a common data visualization that we're all familiar with to convey some sort of a narrative. This is a data viz that I created a while back. It's an everyday data viz. It's just looking at deaths by firearms from 1999 to 2017. Declarative tells you a clear narrative. There's data there. There's not you can do some exploring, but there's not a whole lot. It's just information. This is a dendrogram I made a long time ago. As you can see, there is no right answer here because this is utter chaos. But it's a navigation exploratory tool to try and understand something at greater depth. The last thing that I'll mention here is that within that bottom right-hand corner, we also have visual confirmation versus visual exploration. So visual confirmation is I'm digging, I'm looking, I'm finding to try and find the answer. Visual exploration is I have no idea, or I'm purely just like exploring the void. Lastly, I'll just put here, and these statistics reflect, I think 2015. So they're probably shifting, but about 50% of the market is dominated by, or 50% of the visualization world is dominated by that everyday data viz. And, oh, did I freeze?
Your video is frozen, and then I don't know if you're able to move your buttons. Did we lose Tom? Is anybody else able to hear me? Pop off mute, let me know.
I can hear you, but yeah, I think
Excellent.
Tom's frozen.
Buzzed. Let's give him a quick second, see if he pops back. And no, that was not my way of telling him he's done with his time.
You were like, your time is done.
I was gonna give him another 2 minutes. I was kind of interested. Yeah, like the 50% was the data-driven declarative, right? And that is a framework written by a journalist, right? So I wanted to hear is it journalism specific, or is it also got kind of corporate?
Yeah.
Give just one, 2, 3 more beats. See if we grab him. And for everyone else's benefit, he just at work switched from a Windows machine to a Mac machine, and this was his first Zoom post switchover. So maybe he's destroying a Mac machine right now in his office. His cat will calm him down. I'm sure a few of you saw the cat moving around in the background. All right, maybe we'll move on just to be on the safe side. If he comes back in, we'll give him kind of like a last word, but we'll head on. So yeah, I have the third topic of the evening. So I'm going to be diving into the DuBois challenge. So give me a quick second. As you've seen, all of us have had fun with screen sharing and getting PowerPoint to behave. All right, and Ashley, if you could let me know if you can see full screen.
Yes, we can.
Okay, awesome.
Sorry to quickly interrupt you, Kevin. I am back.
Oh,
My
no,
internet
please
crashed.
do. Yeah. Did you want to sneak in like a last couple of minutes, or at least have like a closing?
Yeah, I guess I'll close real fast.
Yeah.
Thanks, and sorry about that. No, just to close. So I hope that everyone enjoyed that. Just to quickly kind of close here. So analytics is products. So as I was saying, about 50% of the market is kind of dominated by the everyday data viz. Only 5%, again, 2015, only 5% is this exploratory process of trying to dig through data and understand more of it. That is emerging and expanding. As we talk about big data, as we talk about analytics as a service outside of businesses, that will continue to expand. And that behooves us to start thinking about data as product as opposed to just data as an image or data as a static shareable. So I hope that this was really helpful for everyone. If anyone has questions or wants to connect with me, I know we're kind of running over on time here. Please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can check me out on Twitter as well. As we mentioned earlier about the Slack channel, you can contact me on Slack as well if you want to reach out with additional questions there as well. And again, apologize about the internet snafu there. Thanks, everybody.
No worries. Part of the COVID experience, and a few of us when we were being cheeky, and now I can see it's continued in the chat. We actually suspect the cat is actually the
During the entirety of my talk, they were fighting in the background. They loved to play fight, and I just heard like crash, bang, smash, and I was like, keep it together, keep it together.
While you're presenting, yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Yeah,
thank you.
And I'll I love the talk. Tom and I almost go into one of these kind of conversations every time we're together. We've never had a chance to go in this much depth. But I agree, especially like in that early part where Tom was really talking about like really understanding the problem and understanding what you're solving for before you're diving into like building things. It's so essential. It really is directly related to how much people will use your content continuously, daily. The server almost never has a bad day, but let's assume that it does have one. All of a sudden everyone's freaking out, but I can't see like what's going on, right? Like suddenly the company like imploded without them seeing the dashboard. So it's all related into like, having kind of that product design. So thank you for sharing. I'm gonna have to rewatch and find out the books again. So yeah, I will pop into the third one. So let me get this back up and running. So I had this one. All right, and I'm back to full screen. Everybody good? Yes. Okay, thanks. All right, quick intros. I'll keep it light. So I'm Kevin Ford. I run a BI team at Discover. The big team that's credit business intelligence. Right. This is the team. Probably about 2/3 of us in the Chicagoland area, and about 1/3 of us are out in Shanghai. We are actually looking for a new, maybe not beginning Tableau developer, but an experienced Tableau developer right now. Trying to get it posted so I can send links around. But if you are actually looking for a big shop like ours and a Tableau server like Ashley's, hit me up. Our coverage area started off heavily in the acquisition side of credit cards. And then a lot of our sort of positive accomplishments allowed us to expand into portfolio, also in credit cards. And just this last month, the student loans team really liked some of the content we were creating, so we're starting to expand there. I always call this the bragging slide whenever you're at Tableau Day or a conference or something, like, like people are always bragging about how big is their platform. So people consuming our Tableau content, we're getting about 12,000 views in a particular month. Since we have server, we can actually deliver email subscriptions right to everybody's email box. There's about 6,000 of those. We have about 340 unique users in the month of January. And it looks like we have a lot of dashboards, but this is actually down. So we actually we were able to get rid of like 80 last year. Probably get it down to 100, but then we also added to that content. So it's a big platform and a big group. But today I'm not really here to talk about that or any of my accomplishments. I'm actually here to talk about DuBois and the DuBois challenge. And the mistake I made telling a story kind of like this about a week ago at Discover is I didn't start with really who deserves the credit for the story I'm about to tell. There's probably like a bigger halo of people, but in my mind, these are the three that started it all for me, and probably two of them started the whole thing from scratch. Anthony Starks is a data visualist, not specifically to Tableau. It's more like the Data Visualization Society. He writes his own, code-based visualization tools, and we're going to start going into DuBois. It's my understanding he was the first one to really self-create his own personal DuBois challenge. Alan Hillary is a Tableau social ambassador with Tableau. He also teaches classes in New York, and I think it was actually a little bit of their relationship. Alan with the history, Anthony with the data, and both with the passion that started bringing it to the surface. And so by the time I saw what is the DuBois challenge, they had invited Jason Forrest, who's the head of interactives at McKinsey, to be the one who kind of told a little bit of that history before Anthony started showcasing, the work that he did. So you're going to get like a light version of like their presentations that they put together. And I believe this is the second year that the DuBois Challenge has been in play. If you want to learn more, or at least how I learned about this story, like I said, I attended the DuBois Challenge. That was actually like a tug event last year, and have just been hooked ever since. So that's Exploring Data Visualizations of W.B. Du Bois, right? It's February 25th last year. They did a newer one this year, right? The Life and Viz of Du Bois, but it was still Stark's. So actually, I listened to the Stark's section of both of these. I only listened to the history from last year's version. But when Stark's is talking about him sort of discovering these visuals and discovering this intersection of Black history and Viz history, he really got hooked because of a book specifically bringing together all of these visuals into a binding, which happened, I believe, 2015 or 2016. So the rest of this is then the story of what got us here. W.E.B. Du Bois, it was born in 1868. So born in Massachusetts, 5 years after the abolishment of slavery. Grew up in the North, right, in a very sort of anti-slavery abolitionist community. So on a relative scale, was a much more inclusive and a much more tolerant community, relative to like the Deep South. So grew up post-slavery and grew up observing what America was like in the years post-slavery. He's the first African-American to get a PhD at Harvard. First African-American to get a PhD, and that was at Harvard. Went there for history and economics, right? Studying politics, right? And countries, and actually how they would actually run systems, right? Systems of economics. And he's credited as being one of the founding members of the science of sociology. Took all of this study of economics and history and politics, but put it together to actually the science of a group of people. And he founded that sociology and sort of that Institute of Sociology in Atlanta University, where he was largely based throughout his career. His first big study, it was kind of like late 20s, right? He's already at Atlanta University. His first big study is the first 30 years post-slavery, specifically of the migration of Black people to Philadelphia, right? Because Philadelphia was, right, especially with the Revolution, and this is the city where independence, right, all founded. And it's the beginning of getting to the North, right? It was sort of like a draw for people to move there to look for jobs. And so he had an entire study of where are people finding places to live? What kind of jobs are they finding? What are the different income levels that they're able to attain? What opportunities are available to them? And at that time, right, everything was fresh, right? So not a lot of the more nefarious laws that come in the next 30 years are in place to be as big of an impedance as it was in the early 1900s. So that's what made him famous, was he sort of applied science to understanding large-scale communities and that ecosystem of people and economics, and almost like the prediction of where it's going. So with that fame, and the fact that there was a World's Fair coming to Paris, there was a group of there's Black African Americans who were affluent, right, who were creating a prestige at that time, and wanted to actually go to Paris to actually let's get together a story and expression to the rest of the world of who we are, right? The newspapers in the United States, they're not telling our story. They're telling the opposite of our story, right? And if they are telling a story, they're cherry picking, the toughest stories that are there, right? Probably sounds like today's politics as well. So let's go to Paris. Let's control the story and let's put it together. And so Booker T. Washington specifically reached out to Bois because of the Philadelphia study and said, we want you to lead this. We want you to be a part of this. So this is a picture of the World's Fair at 1900. I got some basic stuff. There's 50 million people went through the fair between April and November of that year. At least the way that I heard the story, it sounded like this was supposed to be the first place where there's a Ferris wheel. Someone corrected me that the Chicago World Fair, which was right before it, was the first Ferris wheel. So we're going to call it's the first Ferris wheel in Europe. It was the first place where there was the moving sidewalks, right? So the what you would see like in an airport, someone had invented that and actually put it on the sidewalks around Paris, especially around the Eiffel Tower. It was Art Nouveau was very much an underground art movement, and this happened to be the big expo that launched Art Nouveau into a global movement. It was kind of a hub for a number of things. So the fair was around the Eiffel Tower, just like in this picture. But the fair also followed the Seine River around the side, and so a number of these buildings that are here in this drawing, these were actually erected almost like a pop-up building to continue the fair, right? And there's a street that was there that was called the Street of Nations, and so they were able to pick a spot that was there. So this is a picture, black and white, from the expo. And it wasn't just about the viz that we're about to see. It was much bigger, right? Much bigger in scale. It had pictures of famous African Americans. It had descriptions of the 400 patents that were owned by African Americans at the time. Right, the world, recognized Frederick Douglass, a famous orator. So they had a statue of that. Books written by African Americans, right? It was just a big expression of who we are and what have we accomplished in our first 30 years. Can you imagine where we're going from here? But the part for our story, for the intersection with data viz, is in here. There are 60 posters telling an African American story, right? So here's one of them here. That's a world, right? There's one here that's a pie chart. There's a couple others that are up top, but they're a little bit flared out with the sun that's there. But there's 60 posters kind of telling that story at that time. And so that's really then where, DuBois challenge kind of goes off of here, right? This moment in history. And these 60 posters are still available. They were hidden for 112 years. They were, kind of somewhere they made it back to a Library of Congress, right? They were kind of sealed away and protected. And then, around 2012, right, they resurfaced. I think there was just enough interest in the story, right? Viz was also, becoming a component. But before I get too far into that story, Anthony Starks does this really good job of, DuBois didn't do all these posters by himself, right? He was, like I said, he was a sociologist, founding sociologist at Atlanta University. And he didn't have a lot of time before the expo was going to launch. So he was leveraging students at his university. So the two pictures Anthony shared, one from the Atlanta University debate team, and then a number of women who were students at Atlanta University at the time. So the group together with DuBois, right, they're deciding what stories to tell, how are we going to get the data, and then all of these posters are handcrafted, right? They're all hand-drawn, hand stenciled, hand painted with watercolors and pencils and inks at the time. So I just picked 6 because we're not going to have enough time to go through all 60. I picked 6 of just showcasing what they were like back then. Full disclaimer or full disclosure. One, I probably should have done my opinions are my own, not my company. So let me do that now. And then the other one is there's definitely language that's on these posters inappropriate for 2020. I followed the lead of the other presenters of leaving them as is with respect to historical craft by DuBois and the team. I personally will not be using the language out of respect. So the first poster, right, is at the time of the expo, right? So the expo is 1900, right? So this data might be 1890, maybe 1895. Just starting off by, we are here, statements of we are here. This is where you can find Black America in 1900. And using color coding for density, right? So the black colored states with the highest density, next level down, brown, red, blue, right? You can see the migration that is starting to take place out of the South and starting to head north, still with heavy concentration in the South. This is probably one of the most innovative, and then when you think, next we're going to talk about the challenge, has to be one of the hardest things to do in software like Tableau. But they were visualizing, this is the size of the population of Black people in big cities, size of the population in medium cities, size in small cities, and the red represents the size of the population still in the country and villages, essentially rural living at that time. So a number of posters really telling the world, like, we are here. This is where we are. These, though, this is where it really caught me, right? Really caught my attention last year. This is who we are, is kind of this middle section of posters. And this one might be my favorite, even though it's actually probably one of the simplest. They created the United States as a visual representing the size of the population of Black America at that time, right? It was a 7.5 million Black Americans at that time. And then they compared it to the European countries, or the countries that would be visiting the World's Fair. So Black America is bigger than Australia, right? Australia being 3 million people. Black America is bigger than Norway. It's bigger than Sweden. It's bigger than Norway plus Sweden, right? It's bigger than Switzerland. It's bigger than the Netherlands. It's bigger than Belgium. You might have a couple countries that are on here that are bigger than Black America, but it really kind of puts it into perspective. We are a nation of people. We are a nation of people comparable to your nations. The biggest indicator of education at the time wasn't so much like a degree from a university, or did you have a bachelor's, right? The challenge of the 1800s was literacy and inversely illiteracy. And so this is a really simple bar chart. What is the illiteracy rate of folks in Black America? It's actually better than Romania. I think this is meant to be Serbia. I actually tried to figure out what Serbia was. It's better than Russia at that time, which is an upstanding large empire. It's comparable with Hungary, which was also an empire at the time, right? And then maybe there's some others, Italy, Ireland, France, that actually have a lower literacy rate. But our education level is on the same level as these other countries around the globe, which is a beautiful, bold statement. And then this is how far we've come. Comparable to maybe some of those other countries, but we've surmounted challenges that you have not surmounted, right? So this is probably one of the more famous visuals from the DuBois set, which is a percent of free versus enslaved, to really then illustrate, right, after the Emancipation Proclamation, right, and yes, it took a number of years, as now I think more of us, maybe in my culture growing up, became more aware of the Juneteenth story. It took years to actually get to 100% free, but now is 100% free. And then the same thing with the illiteracy story at the time of slavery, and I apologize for the fuzziness of the visual. but illiteracy was, exceedingly high, like near 100%. But then in the 5, 10, 20, 30 years post-slavery, it just hacked down to 50% as opportunities were made available, and freedoms and opportunities made available. So the 60 posters were just a continuous expression of of all these themes, like where are we, right? This is who we are. This is how far we've come. This is another one of the posters, but now I'm actually starting to show Anthony Stark's work. So he started finding these posters. He tells the story of there was the book that was bound of the old posters, and he started recreating the posters in modern tool sets, right? So that's why these look, more cleaned up, right? That they're getting the benefit of digitization and modern software. And so I think this is another one of the more recognizable posters. I think it's called the fan poster, because it looks like 2 pairs of fans. But the visualization at the time was trying to show, the comparison of Black America, white America, still very much a rural experience, regardless. But when you then look into the other occupation types, you can actually see that Black Americans were getting into domestic personal services, but were probably starting the beginning of hitting a ceiling, getting into more professional manufacturing, mechanical, professional services. Whereas there's a little bit more opportunity for that migration 120 years ago. But one of the amazing things about Stark's is, almost as an homage back to the DuBois era, is let's recreate the same visual, but let's use modern data. And so this is data from 2019. The colors don't exactly match. So, red is no longer agricultural, sort of management, professional related, yellow being service, sales and office. So the colors don't line up with the exact jobs as the original. But it does show that there's more differentiation in the occupations relative to, say, a rural type of a job for both African Americans and whites. But you still get the power of visualization that there is a bias that is inherently still there, right? The service sector is still 24% for Black America, but drops to 16% for white America, right? And then you'll see the shift taking place in some of the other places. Modernizing it. This was one that I could have shown, but it just had a lot of density. Essentially, it was a stacked bar chart getting into different income levels of African Americans around 1900, and then how they spend their money, not their discretionary income, all their money. So like rent, food, clothing. I forgot what the second to last column is, right? And all of the types of spending. And it didn't have a specific comparison. When Stark's then did the recreation, he was able to hunt down the modern information for it and do the same recreation, but just keep it simple of comparing an average African American to white or other races, to see the differences that are there in terms of how folks need to spend their money and what the income and expenditure means for them. The population, so it's not the same one as the original. It's actually one of the other ones where they put a little more granularity into the poster. He recreated the poster with 2021 information. So you're able to see a little bit more of migrating to the Southwest, maybe a few more Midwest states, and up to Washington. I gotta admit, I picked this one because of the fact that it's got a lovely representation for folks that live in the Chicagoland area, and that's kind of part of the city. If you don't know the DuBois challenge, this is the first time you're hearing the story, the challenge is what Anthony Stark's did to really embrace the story from DuBois. That group that I showed at the beginning, especially Starks, Alan Hillary, and I think Alan actually has a couple other people that have been stepping up over the years to help out. So I think I'm probably even doing a disservice to probably everybody who's been involved. But the general idea is every year, honoring Black History Month, is getting a challenge up and running that says, here's a set of posters. The data is already available to you, either in a GitHub or in another location. Try to recreate them. And as a number of you probably have some different levels of Tableau visual creation or maybe some other software. You might see like a line graph, like, okay, yeah, I could probably do that, right? Make a geography graph, right? Tableau does that one. And then you see, some of the very difficult ones, right? You see some bar charts that are showing up as spirals. And it's really going to push your boundaries as to what you're capable of doing. But that is the challenge. And it's agnostic to tool, right? Starks originally did not do it in Tableau. But Tableau having Tableau public makes it a great environment to, try to recreate them and publish them up there. This year, to add a little fun to the DuBois challenge, right? For those who might have did it last year, right? Instead of recreating similar posters, the idea was to take a visual, which was the kind of seeing the world on two sides, and a little bit of the migration was the spirit of the poster, but tell a new story, a new Black American story, and they picked the Tuskegee Airmen, which is actually another. Let me go back. Which is another webinar that's on YouTube. It was another Tableau session, and I have not seen it, but it's on my to-do list. Is to hear the story and Starks recreating yet another amazing poster, an amazing recreation that's here. So that was part of the challenge this year. Is the data for the Tuskegee Airmen is actually then challenge number one. So I love the story so much. I actually ran the challenge, like I guess you almost see it like as a sub chapter. I brought the data into Discover, and we can put the data into Teams, and we have the server so people can publish in a place where people can all share the links, right, and all go see the activity. Also shared it with the Chicago Tug. So I was trying to get the word out to go to the GitHub. So I'm going to showcase a couple, and I know Ashley's on the phone. Actually, I think I saw Chimdi might be on the phone too, which might be a little awkward for me as I didn't really get permission to do this. So I was texting you during Tom's speech to see if you were comfortable. But the general idea, so hopefully everyone can still see my screen as I pop over. So we'll start with Ashley. Ashley took up the challenge, right? This is it's part of why I like the Tableau community at Discover. You get people who actually do this. And I was blown away. Ashley took advantage. I think that was maybe challenge number 6 or 7. But yeah, it's trying to do an area shaded chart going by the years. And it's almost it's the sideways version of that. All right, the black with the green. That was the one of the more famous ones. So recreated where you can see the viz on the left, right? So that's probably just an image in Tableau. And then Ashley recreated into Tableau, right? Using the shading. Oh, it's challenge 5. Thank you, Ashley. So yeah, nicely done. I'm sure you're probably like kicking yourself trying to figure out how to get the slope, as a part of the storytelling process, right? The fact that the day that slavery was announced as abolished was not effective in all locations. So yeah, it's a good recreation. Here's one, right? So looking at comparison of single, married, widowed. There actually was a visual that did something like that compared to other European countries, and actually showed that there was more of a married population in among African Americans than single relative to even European countries, right? So there actually was strength in marriage, right? That's there. So yeah, hopefully sometime I can actually bring that up, maybe in a future one, or I'll post it. But yeah, this is a very good recreation, Ashley. I'd say nicely done as a side-by-side comparison. Oh, thank you for, yeah, you were very respectful on language too. Yeah, this one was good. And actually this one I had trouble with because I don't know how Ashley did it. But I even asked Alan Hillary, I'm like, I get the percentages, right? So we're looking at, children enrolled in school, right? And how that's growing over time, right? 1876, 86, 96. What I couldn't get was the length of the whole bar, right? So it's more, it's always 100%, but it's, they hand drew it to be growing, but I couldn't find from here like the data that would actually be the size of the bar. So I didn't know if it was a population. My guess is Ashley had to go through the same conversation of like, well, I got to do something to get this growing bar chart. Yeah, Ashley, you were gonna say something?
I was just going to say, hopefully there were no rules, because I definitely kind of had to add some of my own stuff in there for some of them.
Yeah, definitely no rules. Yeah, because that's the one thing we don't know is what was the conversation among the Atlanta University students when they were building these, right? They're definitely, you can see, actually now I'll tie it in with Tom. You can see that their product design is strong. They know a story they want to tell. And actually most of the rest of the build Tableau or, hand paint these things, right? That's after we know what we want to do, right? That's after we know we want the story, right? So this could easily just be a creative liberty of, right? We want the bar chart to almost look like it's coming at you, right? This is in the background, this is in the medium ground, and this is heavily in the foreground. But they're always like 100%, pie chart of sorts. And just to really see the story is actually coming your way. So yeah, nicely done, Ashley. Appreciate you stepping up to the challenge. So like I said, this is Chimdi, and I don't know if he's still on the call. I'm going to just move forward and beg forgiveness later if such a thing is required. This was the visit
over here. Please feel free to go ahead.
Okay. Well, then I'm also going to turn it to you at some point. So unless you really don't want to speak up. This was the visit of the day yesterday, right? Very prestigious. Tableau was looking at all the content, moving about the Twitter and the internet. And I didn't pick it, it caught my attention because I'm going to do the DuBois challenge. But even Tom hopped on the call before when we're doing like all of our like sound check and stuff. And he goes, did you see the visit of the day yesterday? Like this thing is amazing. Okay. And not just because I know he's on the call listening to me make him blush. So not only does this recreate, right, the 10 visuals that were actually there, kind of goes one step further. Oop. Oh yeah, it's got to refresh because I had it sitting here for a second. It also has another 10 visuals that were recreated, right? So kind of went deeper into the book to recreate them. If I come back here and maybe I'll, let's see, which one do I want to pick? Actually, since I had the fuzzy illiteracy chart, right? So if you pick on this visual, right? So you're getting this, this is built in Tableau. Very cleanly built. There's a number, for a few of us that were playing with it, right? There's a number of sort of features that Chimdi was able to maintain, but there's this added experience which is fantastic, right? So you get a slide out talking, probably is he actually in the book, right? Is a little bit of a description going along with the visual, right? Giving credit to Starks and the DuBois challenge. And then also gives you the ability to toggle on the original visual. So now I'm a little bit, sad. I couldn't find the full res version, right? You already have it built in here. And right, every single one of these, right? So this is portrait 6. I'm just going to randomly go back to portrait 5. Okay. Yeah, this was the same one that like Ashley was working on, right? So similar experience of getting a little bit of the context. but also has hidden in here the original visuals that are there. And they're beautifully done. Actually, it looks like maybe come to the social networking, maybe you, Ashley, and anybody else who knows how to get that slant post 1860, maybe we can problem solve it. But yeah, this is probably the best one that I've seen. And actually, super kudos for this, right? Kind of a show info button. Even told the story about DuBois maybe even a little better than I did. And actually, I hadn't seen the picture of him in more of his in his later years. DuBois was an activist and was with a number of people pushing for laws and civil rights. And this is probably more indicative of those years in his life. So yeah. Chimney, do you anything else you want to chime in and share about the creation, or even just what the story and the challenge means to you?
I guess I'll just say that it was really interesting for me because I thought that I would go in and just do one, but then I told myself, okay, I'll look into the history of the particular one, and then from there I just kind of went down a rabbit hole. And then in the process, I guess I saw like a gallery done by I believe it's the New York Institute. And then that gave me the idea, like, well, why pick one? Just do everything. And then, just kind of went into that. And it was really great experience because I think DuBois is one of those people that was way ahead of his time and is only now getting his recognition. So it was a really good way to get in touch with the history and also kind of have this nice experience doing this in Tableau. Some of them were easy, some of them were not so easy, but overall, I think it was a really great experience for me. So, thanks for asking. Yeah,
no problem. I'm going to recommend everybody get on Tableau Public and figure out how this happened. Right. Every time I saw this, I was like, there's no way I can do this in Tableau. And maybe there's a bunch of people like, I know how to do that in Tableau. I'm not one of those people. So, but yeah, so kudos to you for the viz of the day. But also for what is obviously some advanced visualization development. It's very nicely done. All right, that's all that I have. I think not just for me for the DuBois challenge, I think maybe even just across the board. Are there any questions or comments for the group before we wrap up sort of the formal setting? All right. Yeah, that wraps up sort of our 3 sessions. Like I said, we'll leave the we'll turn off the recording. We'll leave the Zoom open if anybody wanted to hang out. Vinny had a good question that I saw. It was a little bit about server and corporate life. Tom had a few things, like I'm sure there'll easily be a product thing that's going on. But if you don't hang out with us kind of as we're networking, everybody have a great evening and happy St. Patrick's Day again. Take care.